There's a whole history of why these bodies were never even investigated in the first place. Hint, hint, white people in the town thought it didn't want to do it. Black Wall Street was a place called Greenwood, which is a Black community. It's on the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Sort of an isolated enclave of Black business owners, domestic workers, people just living their lives sort of in this almost utopia. So Black Wall Street was a place where Black Tulsans created the American dream. After the massacre happened, the bodies were dumped all over Tulsa in different burial grounds, in cemeteries and different places. There are theories and opinions and thoughts about where these bodies are. So in 2019, the city of Tulsa decided that they were going to finally excavate and look for the bodies of the 1921 massacre. There's an investigation going on today about where these bodies are, and there's politics. There's a whole history of why these bodies were never even investigated in the first place. Hint, hint, white people in the town thought it didn't want to do it, right? So that's sort of what this film is looking at, is that 150-year span of Greenwood. This was a story that I had pitched before, like years ago. And the nicest way that I can say it is I don't think people were ready to tell that story. There are a few reasons why it became something that people were interested in. Is one, this investigation that's happening 100 years later. Two, the 100-year anniversary. And three, what was going on in America in 2019 and 2020. It was Trump's America. I think people felt for the first time we were talking about race in a way that we hadn't before, or we were being forced to look back and reckon with some of the race stuff that had been swept under the rug. And I think in the same way, Tulsa, Greenwood is doing the same thing, is literally digging up the past and having to reckon with that sin. I wanted the opportunity to create and imagine that for myself, as well as what do we look like going to balls? What do we look like, being the heads of newspapers and what does it look like to create your own utopia? It's important for Black people to see the beauty in ourselves. And I think it's important for also white people to know this history. So that way it's more understood why we are today where we are. What I want for people to take away from this film is, one, the beauty of what Black people in this country are, despite the challenges, the deliberate challenges that this country has levied upon Black people. Greenwood still exists today. People still live in Greenwood today, and it's not nearly what it used to be. There used to be 200 Black-owned businesses, around that much. Now there are less than 10 Black-owned businesses there. It used to be, 40 blocks, and now it's a block. It's a tiny block. And so the modern connection is that the massacre didn't just happen and that's the end of the story. It's that 100 years later, through eminent domain, through gentrification, through redlining, and through urban renewal, a lot of these people are still suffering displacement. When I went down to Tulsa, I saw a bunch of commemorations. You'll have a statue here, you'll have this there. And that's great for us to commemorate this thing that happened and to remember that it happened, not let it happen again. But I think that people's wealth was stripped from them, right? There are survivors. There are people that survived the massacre who still live today. I think that for those survivors and the hundreds of descendants, I think we hate to use the word reparations, but I think As somebody, somebody who I was interviewing with said, okay, y'all don't want to call it reparations, call it a love donation, right? Call it a love donation. Whatever it is for these people who, you know, who lived this thing 100 years ago and who are still living. Something was broken and we have to repair it, right? That's what that is. So I think the descendants and the survivors deserve something from the city for sure.